Revolutions are always won with blood. I will stay and fight. I am ready to die if necessary. I am living in history. I am not afraid to die. Mr. Mercy, I have lost my father. My mother is in the United States. My sister has fled. I have no family. Just because. Please. Good actions make you a good man. I'm going to go and rescue him or die trying.
Whoa. I don't think that's such a good idea. Ride with me to near the jail. We'll figure out how to rescue him.
Mr. Marston, you're truly a friend of this land.
Luisa Fortuna is one of the most interesting and well-written characters in Red Dead Redemption. As a very young school teacher, aged 19 years old, Luisa completely humanizes the New Paradise revolutionary struggle and provides it with a much-needed human interest factor. The hardships that Luisa and her family endure simply do not faze her, despite the overwhelming odds and devastating losses. Luisa is able to keep a cool head under pressure while urging John to help her cause and ultimately to be a good man by not turning his back on those who need him. Luisa is a no-nonsense leader and often takes action to achieve immediate and measurable results. Despite her youthful age, Luisa has dedicated herself to the local rebellion while taking charge within her family by ensuring they're well and looked after. She's focused, resolute, committed to defending the oppressed while fighting tyranny. Yet, despite all of Luisa's poise and abilities, her limited life experience and youthful age convey a strong naivety, which leads her to trust an extremely flawed leader and love an odious man. Luisa Fortuna was born in 1892 and is a 19-year-old school teacher and passionate revolutionary in the New Paradise state of Mexico. Luisa is dedicated to the revolutionary struggle and is regarded as not only one of the best leaders, but also even one of the best fighters in the burgeoning state rebellion. Her family, the Fortunas, are impoverished and live in their homestead together at Campo Morada in the Perdido region of New Paradise.
On revolution.
Revolution? Another one?
Yeah. Never really ends. This whole place has been a hotbed for revolution since before the Spanish left. Now there's another local guy running around promising the peasants their freedom. Just like the last two or three. Local government, foul bunch. Colonel Allende, he runs this place like a feudal king. He's an awful individual.
Is that so?
Yeah. Until someone puts a bullet in his head.
In the mission The Gunslinger's Tragedy, John arrives in Mexico and meets Landon Ricketts, the infamous and legendary American gunslinger of the old Wild West. Landon brings John up to speed on the current objective conditions in the New Paradise state of Mexico. New Paradise is ruled by the cruel and despotic Colonel Agustin Allende, who rules over the citizens of the state like a medieval king or feudal lord with absolute power, while trampling on the rights and freedoms of the oppressed peasants and workers. John Marston is first introduced to Luisa Fortuna when he joins Landon Ricketts to save her from a clandestine state prison on behalf of her brother, Emilio Fortuna. Emilio asks Landon for his help in this matter. In the mission Landon Ricketts rides again, Ricketts tells John that Emilio knows of an escuela, but Emilio doesn't know if it's Javier Escuela. Regardless, Landon then tells John that Emilio's sister, Luisa, a school teacher, is being held in a state prison. John is initially hesitant, but is convinced by Landon after an argument, in which Landon calls out John for being selfish and narrow-minded. The two men are able to locate the clandestine prison just outside of El Matadero in the Diaz Coronas region. Landon and John fight their way through the caves, taking out 24 guards, and blow open the door to Luisa's cell with dynamite. Landon and John then escort Luisa to a safe distance outside and away from the prison while taking out more soldiers. John meets Landon for a drink at the saloon in Chuparosa, seeking more information about Javier Escuela. Unfortunately, Landon doesn't have any more or new information, but then asks John why he wants Javier so badly. The two men then discuss their lives, with John sharing why he left the Vanderlyn gang. Suddenly, Luisa runs in desperately seeking their help. Colonel Allende has ordered state forces to round up innocent people for summary execution. Landon and John agree to help and immediately ride out to ambush the army convoy and rescue the civilians. The two men successfully ambush the convoy, kill all of the soldiers, and commandeer the wagons holding the civilians. John and Landon head towards the border, so the civilians will be safe within the US. Landon and John take out more soldiers at the Ramita de la Bahia bridge, then cross the border and secure the civilians' safety and freedom. John arrives at the Fortuna's homestead at Campo Morada to meet with Luisa and provide her with any assistance she may need. With the increased tensions and violence throughout the state of New Paradise, the Fortunas have decided to pack up and flee. However, the family believes it best if Luisa's younger sister, Miranda, were to live in Yucatan, where it would be much safer for her. Luisa then asks John to escort Miranda by wagon to the small dock at Puerto Cuchillo, where a man they trust will take Miranda to Yucatan. John leads Miranda on wagon through several checkpoints and barricades, fighting off several groups of soldiers. John eventually arrives at Puerto Cuchillo in one piece with Miranda, and she meets up with those who will safely escort her to Yucatan. John finds Luisa upset and shaken at the ruins of her home at Campo Morada. She is distressed because the leader of the rebellion, Abraham Reyes, in who Luisa believes is her faithful partner, has been apprehended by the Mexican army and has been sentenced to death. John agrees to help Luisa, and the two make the journey to El Presidio. Upon arriving at the fortress, John sneaks inside over a deteriorating portion of the wall. Once John is inside, he promptly snipes the executioner and all of the guards. Upon reaching and freeing Reyes, John and Reyes then escape on horseback. A rebel guide waiting outside the fortress then guides John and Reyes to Luisa, waiting on the shoreline of the San Luis River. While fleeing the fortress on horseback, Reyes makes a distasteful and disrespectful comment regarding Luisa to John. He offers to share Luisa with John, despite the fact she's in love with Abraham and believes him to be faithful, after inquiring if John wanted women and alcohol to celebrate. Abraham is anything but a focused and rigorous revolutionary leader of upstanding moral character. John finds an angry and frustrated Luisa camped out near her destroyed homestead at Campo Morada, who informs John that her father was apprehended and murdered by the Mexican army the previous day. She pleads for John's help, who is more concerned for his family, but is eventually convinced by a desperate yet determined Luisa. Allende is providing reinforcements and supplies to fight against the rebels, and Reyes wants to destroy the supplies and wipe out the reinforcements. Luisa tells John that the rebels have dynamite that John can ignite to destroy the supplies and kill the reinforcements. A convoy with 2 wagons and soldiers on horseback eventually arrives at the Frontera Bridge. John ignites the dynamite and chaos ensues, with the supplies destroyed and reinforcements wiped out. John arrives at Luisa's temporary camp near the ruins of Campo Morada, and she informs him that DeSanta has been ordered to carry out a massacre in Sepulcro. John agrees again to help and follows the rebels on horseback to Sepulchro. Just before arriving at Sepulchro, John asks the men not to shoot DeSanta because he needs him alive in order to extract information from him regarding Escuela and Williamson. DeSanta is executing rebels at the cemetery until John and the rebels attack. After taking out several soldiers, DeSanta attempts to escape by running away on foot. John eventually catches up to and lassos DeSanta, hog-tying and stowing him on his horse and riding back to Sepulchro. After beating DeSanta, he eventually relents and tells John that Javier Escuela is hiding out in Casa Madrugada. John then walks off and the rebels finish off DeSanta by shooting him several times. John rides to Casa Madrugada, but it's a trap and he's met by an ambush of soldiers. After taking out the soldiers and surviving the ambush, John learns from a local prostitute that Escuela hasn't been at Casa Madrugada in months. Meanwhile, state forces have been executing rebels in Escalera, while they have also once again captured Abraham Reyes. John arrives just in time and witnesses civilians rising up and fighting soldiers. John then discovers Reyes on the verge of death as he's about to be executed by Major Raul Zubieta and 2 soldiers. John attempts to negotiate Reyes' freedom, however Luisa suddenly and hastily appears, and she foolishly and recklessly charges at Zubieta while only in possession of a knife that she wields in the air. Luisa is tragically shot 3 times, apparently killing her. John then kills the 2 soldiers, but is then challenged to a duel by Zubieta. John easily defeats Zubieta in the duel and avenges Luisa's very sudden and poorly written death. John then frees Reyes and continues to assist the rebels in the massive shootout in Escalera. In the aftermath of the major confrontation, in which both Bill Williamson and Colonel Agustin Allende were killed, the rebels are victorious, and John finds the time to confront Reyes about Luisa's ultimate sacrifice and martyrdom. However, Reyes, insufferable to a fault, cannot determine or remember who Luisa was, despite the fact that she literally gave everything for him and the revolution, including, of course, the ultimate sacrifice, her own life. Unfortunately, due to her young age and limited life experience, Luisa still possesses youthful naivety, as Reyes is selfish, crude, vain, boastful, and narcissistic. Reyes views Luisa, as well as women in general, as nothing more than a convenient sex object, to be used and discarded as necessary. Reyes' wealthy upbringing and background ultimately shapes his views of her, who he considers to be inferior due to being a poor peasant. In fact, Reyes often cannot recall Luisa's name, further demonstrating his callous and repulsive treatment in how he truly views her. Nonetheless, Luisa is unfortunately and tragically dedicated to Reyes, who in turn does not care one iota for her. Luisa is young and naive, and is simply unaware and has not caught on to Reyes' indifference and that he's only interested in using her for sex. With Luisa so dedicated not only to the revolution, but also to Reyes, she is willing to do anything to assist him and the revolutionary struggle. Luisa Fortuna was the real leader of the revolution, providing the brains and much of the brawn as she could think very quickly and decisively on her feet, while more than holding her own in combat. Luisa was far braver, much more intelligent, and determined than the vast majority of very young adults around her age. She demonstrated consistent poise, tremendous leadership abilities, and was grounded and focused, despite the brutal murder of her father and her family fleeing New Paradise. Luisa and the Fortunas also provided a much-needed human interest aspect to the revolution and the rebel movement. Luisa's story and character are both tragic. She was a focused, mature, and dedicated leader who genuinely cared for the oppressed, yet could not see the real Reyes due to her youthful naivety. While her character was very well written, who served a key purpose in the story of Red Dead Redemption, her death, however, was very poorly written, and therefore she was wasted, thrown away, without even a cutscene, in which she foolishly ran towards 3 armed soldiers wielding only a knife. Although Luisa was more than ready and willing to sacrifice herself and die for the oppressed, her death, however, was lazily and hastily written, as surely Luisa, with her intelligence and leadership abilities, would surely understand the futility of bringing a knife to a gunfight. The tragedy of Luisa Fortuna was not only her inability to see the real Abraham Reyes, but also the fact that her character in the end was ultimately wasted. However, while her death was poorly written, I believe that such a hasty death just slightly leaves the door open for a return. In 1914, when you're playing as Jack Marston, it is reported in the news that Abraham Reyes has since become a brutal tyrant in Mexico. Red Dead Redemption always felt incomplete without a story DLC, even a small one, in which Luisa returns to kill Reyes. With the end of the Wild West era and the encroaching, sophisticated, technological progress of 20th century civilization, Jack could have met Luisa in Mexico, with the two of them finishing their story together. At least that's what it seemed like the direction the story was heading towards, with this very interesting exchange between John and Luisa.
Do you have children, Mr. Marston?
I have a son at home and a daughter in heaven.
Is he looking after your wife?
I hope so. He's not much younger than you, but I don't know. He's still young. We tried to protect him, give him a gentler childhood than what we had. Guess I failed at that.
What is his name?
Jack. Jack Marston.